I want to ask you a question on what led to this deal. And there's two sides to this. What I believe in, and that's Trump twisting Netanyahu's arm. And I'll read a quote by Aaron David Miller from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, he's not a big fan of Trump. And he said the following, quote, "There is no precedent, none, zero, for an American president lecturing an Israeli prime minister to accept a plan. It has never happened." And, you link that to that famous photo of the phone on, I think it was Trump's lap, and Netanyahu calling the Qatari prime minister with notes. And this is definitely not something that's happened before. So is it Trump being a good negotiator and pressuring Netanyahu? Or the other argument I was listening to today, which I don't really agree with, but I want to get your thoughts, and that's that Trump, the reason peace worked is that because Trump unequivocally backed Israel even more than Biden, who was, it's a fair point, Biden was pressuring Israel a bit more initially, at least in the public eye. And that backing, that unconditional backing to Israel and the threats made to Hamas put Hamas in a corner, forcing them to accept a peace deal. So do you think that Trump twisted Netanyahu's arm or pressured Hamas to such a level that they had no choice but to accept a peace deal, or somewhere in the middle?
I fundamentally reject the second explanation. This is actually exactly what the Biden people said as a justification for their bear hug strategy with the Israelis. Early on, immediately after October 7th. They just gave the Israelis everything they wanted. And they said that the bear hug strategy, by giving the Israelis everything in terms of support that they demanded, would give the United States leverage that it could later on cash in order to pressure the Israelis into a deal. That moment apparently never arrived during the Biden administration. And you saw 4 UN Security Council resolutions calling for the release of the hostages, nevertheless being vetoed by the Biden administration. Also, it is erroneous in my view because it assumes that in order for the United States to have leverage with Israel, you need to first give them unconditional support. The United States has given the Israelis tremendous amount of support. In fact, Aaron Miller in his quote points this out, that there's just no precedent of an American president lecturing the Israeli prime minister, which is perhaps a key reason as to why we have had such a failure in America's approach towards this for the last 30, 40 years, because we were never willing to give that pressure. Instead, we were all pursuing various variations and degrees of that bear hug strategy, and it's been an absolute disaster for the region and for the United States itself. What I think happened here is that you had a trigger. The trigger was Israel's overreach by targeting Qatar. That really tremendously backfired. It changed the debate inside of the administration. And it fed into something that already had been happening, which is that on the American right, in the America First constituency, Israel's numbers have been plummeting, particularly in the last couple of months. And you've seen more and more voices coming out being very critical of this, not out of a position of compassion with the Palestinians necessarily, but out of a compassion for the idea that America should not be led by Israel and that Israel's interests should not come ahead and take precedent over America's interests. A lot of people in the America First constituents were also very frustrated because they were fearing that Israel once again would drag the US into another war in the region, that this was damaging America's standing, and that it was taking so much of Trump's bandwidth and was never ending, so that he would not have enough bandwidth to address the many domestic political priorities that constituency has. And this was just bubbling up and reaching such a level that it became clear to Trump that Israel's continued warfare was starting to become a political negative for Trump himself. And unless something happened that changed the trajectory of this, then he would go down to a certain extent with Netanyahu, particularly as midterm elections are coming up. What helped trigger things and actually get Trump to move is the overreach by the Israelis by attacking Qatar, and the rather united front that several countries in the region presented to Trump in pressuring him. And I think that really shifted things, and he realized he needs to put pressure not just on the Israelis, on everyone, but also on the Israelis. And I think the Israelis really strong arm, not just into that apology to the Qataris. And incidentally, as you know, Netanyahu said something publicly about, this wasn't really that or so. And that's when the White House released the image, the picture of him actually reading from those notes. And in the background, you even saw a senior Qatari official sitting in the Oval Office.
Okay, so hold on. Netanyahu rejected that this went on. I missed that part. So he said that he did not apologize to Qatar before the image was released.
Originally, he in Israeli media, he kind of tried to diminish it and try to explain it away. And in response to that, the White House released the image that showed he was actually reading from a set agreed upon apology with a Qatari official sitting in the background in the Oval Office overseeing the whole thing.
What is a bigger obstacle to peace? Hamas not accepting to disarm, Hamas not having one leader to essentially go towards one path, which is peace, and have maybe factions of it or separate organizations, or the Islamic, the Palestinian, I think Islamic Jihad, continue to fight Israel, because all Israel needs is just a few attacks and they have justification to continue attacking Gaza. That's a big concern. Is that a bigger obstacle? Hamas continue, or some members of Hamas continue to attack Israel or not disarming, or Israel finding some sort of loophole to continue the war? Which one concerns you more?
I think all of those things do concern me, and I will add another thing to it. Sky News just revealed something that many had already suspected, and there had been some reporting on it, but apparently they found the receipts that the Israelis had been funding certain radical groups in Gaza that are opposed to Hamas and have affiliation with ISIS, with Daesh. And
they're the ones that killed they killed the Instagram journalist that was pretty viral. Did you see it? Did you see that story? He was shot by, which is sad. He was shot after a peace deal was reached. Yeah. I forgot the guy's name, but it's such a sad story. He's one of the big influencers that survived the war, and he was shot by Palestinians affiliated to Israel, funded or affiliated or supported by Israel, and also affiliated to ISIS. What a story.
And some Israeli folks close to the US, to the Israeli government, celebrating his killing as well online. So you know, all of these things make it very, very tricky. So this is still a very fragile situation. Again, a key thing that I have seen make a huge difference in similar situations in the past, in which there's been a fear of sabotage attempts from any side, is the American president being extremely firm and determined to not allow that to happen. Let me give you an example. Over the course of US-Iran negotiations, there's always been attempts by the Iranian hardliners to sabotage it. There's been an attempt by the Israelis, some folks on the US side. During the JCPOA, towards the end of it, just weeks before, actually a couple of days before the actual official implementation date were to happen, you had 10 or so American Navy folks from the American Navy accidentally getting into Iranian territorial waters. They got taken by the IRGC. It was a big crisis, but within 16 hours, because of 5 direct conversations between John Kerry and Javad Zarif, they were all released. Nothing big happened. The US side did not use any threatening language. The Iranians abided by it. It could have happened even sooner had it not been for the time difference. And a lot of that was because there was such a strong commitment by the president at the time and on the Iranian side not to allow even the smallest incidents. In this case, it's not a small incident. This was a major incident to be able to take an advantage of by those who wanted to sabotage things. We need that same discipline sustained in order for this to work. The other side, those who want to sabotage it, have plenty of opportunities, and they may also have time on their side, because it's impossible in the long run to get the United States to stay that laser focused on this issue. But at least for the next 6 months or a year, we really are going to need that to make sure that this is moved into a much more insulated process that is protected from those type of sabotage attempts.
So Netanyahu was facing massive protests before October 7th. He was facing potential impeachment. And many people thought the war was used as a way for him to remain in power. What happens to Netanyahu now that the war is coming to an end?
Well, it remains to be seen. There are going to be elections next year, even if the current government doesn't collapse, in which case, of course, the elections would come sooner. We've seen that Trump's pressure seems to have also forced Smotrich and Ben-Gvir to kind of back down, at least for now. But, you know, there's also another risk, which is that while there may be an end to the fighting in Gaza, there may be an intensified fighting between Israel and Lebanon. There may be other